Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. We're your hosts, Harold and Rachel. I just did it for you, Rachel. Yeah, I'm usually
Okay.
throwing it over to you, making this really
Thank
awkward
you,
transition. I'll just do it for you this time. We just got done with our pre-show, our members pre-show, had a good little discussion there, and yeah, we're going to be talking today about small scale urban and suburban homesteading, or just small scale homesteading, whether that's in the country on a small piece of property or in the city or in the suburbs. And I guess the main reason, I guess I should ask you, Rachel, how you doing? I mean,
I'm doing good. I was just listening to us as we started this, and I noticed that since we've started doing the pre-show, we're so much more relaxed when we come in. It's actually kind of
overly relaxed. We forget things.
I hope people like it. I think it's kind of nice to have a relaxed, laid-back podcast for people to listen to.
I mean, right to the point, like, so we forget to say things that I think we normally would want to say in the beginning, like how you doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing good. Been busy like you have around the homestead, just trying to get spring normally isn't here yet, but this year spring is, I think, here, but then tomorrow it might not be. That's been my problem. I feel like I'm running behind, but when I look at the calendar, I'm not running behind. But when I look outside and it's 65 degrees all the way up here in northern Michigan, I feel behind, but then the next day it snows. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a couple 100 miles south of you, and we're experiencing the same thing. I mean,
it's
just like I said, it's 70 one day, a couple days later, it's 20, for a high, 20 something. And for high, it's back and forth so aggressively. I mean, my wife actually literally went camping the other day at the campground.
You're kidding me.
Because it was in the upper 60s. And we took the golf cart out, and we were buzzing around the golf cart out there at the campground. And
it doesn't surprise me.
I had to go do some stuff, but she stayed the night a couple nights, and her sisters were out there. And it's like, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, it's first week of March, and you was camping at the campground in 60-degree weather. I mean,
it was beautiful. I loved it.
And then a couple days later, it was 20 degrees. So
I know it's been quite the shock to the system too. And if you have allergies, which I have, my husband has allergies, it's been a little bit rough.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't have allergies too bad, but I am out working in it, and it's been kind of back and forth and crazy. And it's like, it's hard to adjust. Your body kind of regulates a little bit, super cold, super warm. And it's like, man, it's just, there's no regulating your body. It's like, you don't know what to expect. Anyway. Yeah. I wanted to talk about this topic because we haven't talked about it in a while. We've had some guests on that were urban homesteaders and things in the last few months, but we haven't really talked about it lately. And I feel like something that's been on my mind lately is, we just did a book club where we went through Ben Falk's book, and Ben talks a lot about in that book about setting this legacy on a bigger piece of property and developing it for future generations, your grandkids, whatnot. And yeah, that's all great. And then, I keep running into a lot of other podcasters and homesteaders that are like promoting this, get out of the city, get your land, move,
right.
And there's, and I get that. I get
it too. I mean, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
but
I get it. But I'm also like in this place where it's like, I feel a little bit discouraged when that's all I hear, because I think a lot of people do, because it's like, I can't, or I don't want to, or I'm not in a position to do that. Or maybe I just don't want to do that, but I do want to homestead. And I just feel like maybe a lot of people feel like, okay, well, then there's no hope. Why should I even bother if I can't get out?
Yeah. And I feel like, we're making it sound, when we say that, when we say get out, move out of the city, I feel like we're making it sound bad, when there's plenty of people that like homesteading in the city. They like homesteading in town. They like they like growing their vegetables and possibly having some animals and still being able to get on the bus and go see a play or a musical. They like that lifestyle, or there's just no way for them to
move
like
out,
or they have family next door, or
in my situation, my situation is, like, I'm in my 50s. We have a place that we've lived in for over 30 years. Yeah. For me to move and take on a mortgage in my 50s on a bigger piece of land, when I'm doing, 80% of the things I would like to do anyway, right here.
Right.
Yeah. Would I like to have more land so I can have bigger animals? I think that would be the only big plus for me, maybe a bigger food forest. But, yeah, I mean, when I first built this, I mean, I almost couldn't even imagine, moving to the country because it's like, man, I'm doing everything I want to do. Now, as times went on, I mean, I would love to have some
Right.
pigs and some cows and things like that. I mean, I think that would be cool. I'll never
Yeah.
could have that in the city, but at the same time, it's like, it's just a small piece of homesteading, that I can't do.
Mhm.
Very small piece, really. And I can even barter and do things to get
Yeah, I
those
was just gonna
products.
say that. I mean, you can still
Anyway,
get all those
so
farm
so
products.
yeah. So the question is always, is it worth it on a small piece of land? Is it practical? I mean, are you really going to
Mhm.
accomplish anything that's really a big deal? I mean, is it really practical to homestead on a small piece of property? And is it even possible wherever I am? And I think those are the questions you have to ask. I mean, everybody's situation is different. I mean, you might have a 10th acre or you may have a cement slab behind your house. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be different. It may not be worth hardly doing much where you're at because maybe you literally don't have any space. Um, maybe you live in an apartment and you don't even have a balcony. Yeah, there's still things you can do, but
Yeah.
is it worth it? I mean, energy wise versus production, I don't know. That's going to be for you to decide. I say if you have one of these really common, what I would say the average place is in America is probably like these little, what we call a postage stamp lot, where like a tenth of an acre or something like that,
Right.
backyard, little, where you mow your little backyard and you got a little front yard. Yes, it's worth it. You can grow a lot of food in that space, a lot of food in that space.
Yeah.
Um, and then beyond that is it's only better because now you can actually, if you have a little bit more than that, you can even expand into the realm of many food forests and berry bushes and things like that, and even expand it more. You have a little bit less than that, then maybe you're going to have to do balconies and front porches and walkways and you can do a lot. And like I said, you're going to have to balance that out
Right.
and see if it's worth it and run the numbers and say, because there is an energy use on that. I mean, and I keep saying energy use because there was an article that came out not so long
Yeah.
ago
This
that
article.
blew up everybody. I mean, everybody was talking about it, and I intentionally did not talk about it when everybody else was talking about
I kind of alluded to it in
it.
my
You
interview
did.
with Dakota.
You did. And it was talking about how urban gardening is more uh it's less carbon friendly rather than large farms,
Yeah.
conventional farming.
Yeah.
And if you read the article and you see how they based that on, that I find a lot of flaws in their theory.
Yeah.
And the study was actually done in Michigan, 73 farms, I believe, to a University of Michigan, and they were just saying the carbon footprint on these urban gardens is way higher. Well, yeah, unless you're a permaculturist like us and you're doing things way different. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, naturally, if you're going to do things in a conventional way, but on a small scale, yeah, it could be very carbon unfriendly. Yeah, it could. I
It
still
could
say
be.
it's better. What's that?
It could be. I mean,
It
yeah.
could
I
be.
mean, it could be way less carbon friendly to have your own garden, but
I think that if you're doing it like I would say we do it, and like most people we
yeah.
probably know do it, the carbon footprint's way better than any
Yeah.
conventional farm. Way, way, way better. So,
Yeah.
so energy uses versus what you're bringing in, what you're taking out. I mean, if you especially once you close that loop, if you're working on closing loops, your carbon
Yeah.
footprint goes
For
way
sure.
down, way, way down, which is
Well,
something
and
I'm constantly working on.
no tilling with
Yeah. No
yeah,
till, you're not bringing in a bunch of product with, so you're thinking about transportation costs
chemicals.
and,
No, yeah, less
and building
chemicals.
costs and, yeah, I mean, it's just, of course, I mean, it can always be done better, but there's no doubt that conventional farming has a large footprint. And the way they're gauging that, I think there's flaws in that
Oh,
anyway.
there was a lot of
A
flaws in
lot of
that. Yeah.
flaws. So anyway, that's why the only reason I bring that up. But it does make me want, I think, and you brought up a point here a while back that you didn't even take as an insult. I think we were in book club and you were talking about the fact that
Yeah.
um
I
that you
didn't
actually
take
look
it.
at it as like we're making such a difference that they're actually trying to attack us.
Yeah, there's so many people that have started gardening and
Yeah.
homesteading in the last several years that they have taken notice. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I
They're
look
trying
at
to do
it is,
studies
oh,
to try to
look.
make it look bad so people will
Yeah.
stop doing it
It
because
feels
it
like
is
it,
actually
doesn't
making
it?
a difference. And I think it's a good take
I
on it.
mean,
Don't be offended by it. Be flattered by it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I try not to be a conspiracy theorist, but then they put some article out like that, and it's like, why are you
Yeah.
targeting home
Why
gardeners?
are you, why would that even be a study you would run? I mean, because your
Yeah.
intention was to show that it's somehow not as good as people think,
Yeah. Well, it
and
felt like the attention was to tell people, don't do it, just go buy.
anyway, there were actually
Just go
several
buy
articles
food.
written. um I linked to one of them. that talks a little bit about the study and how they came up with the numbers and all that. And that link, I'll put that link in the show notes for people, anybody that wants to go look at it. I almost
I
don't
think
even
a
want to
lot of
support
people
it.
saw it.
Yeah, I think most people probably saw it. Actually, this one that I posted is I couldn't even find that one. The actual one that had the really crazy clickbaity title. I couldn't even find it. I don't know if it got taken down or
Oh,
was behind
oh
some
my.
paywall or what. But I found other articles that were
Right.
written about the study also. Because I remember it had some crazy clickbaity title that
Yes, it was horrible.
was over
Yeah.
the top. Yeah. Anyway, I want to say that that I think it's worth it because well, it's always been worth it.
Yeah, it
You
has
think about the
been.
Victory Gardens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In 1943, I mean, just here's some stats for you. There were 20 million Victory Gardens in 1943, producing 10 billion pounds of food in
That's
1944.
crazy. That's a lot.
In other words, 40% of the U.S. vegetable supply was done in Victory Gardens, which majority of those were done in small backyards and homes and cities
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah.
Two
If you
thirds of those
remember,
gardens, matter of fact, were in town, cities, and suburban areas,
yeah.
and about 27% of that food was produced on urban and suburban homesteads. That's
Yeah, and if you
amazing.
see some of the pamphlets, because you can still see like
Yeah,
you
front
Google,
yards and
it was
everything.
you
Yeah,
can see they do like the overhead view, and it was intended for these little tiny postage stamp lots.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
People were tilling up their front yards right along the sidewalks,
In
and
fact, when I started listening to you years ago, your song or your intro
Mhm.
wasn't really a
Yep.
song. It said "Grow for Victory."
Yep, it was a Victory Garden ad that was put on the
Yeah,
radio. It was part of that. You know what? I
I
ought to
loved
just
that.
I ought to just put that in front of one of the I ought to just bring that back for one special episode and just play that
You
for
should.
one
That was pretty
time.
great.
Yeah, maybe
That
next
was a good
episode.
one.
Maybe on the next episode we'll just play that for just for giggles, just to put it out there. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people were turned off by it because they were like, it's too long of an intro, So I kind of done away with it, but it did say a lot. I mean, you had the Victory Garden promotion and and people were because it's where I was. I mean, it's like basically I was growing for my own personal victories of health, so it was kind of victory. It's
Yes.
like a victory garden,
Well,
a
and
personal
that's
victory
what
garden.
the
Yeah,
article just is. It leaves out all of that. The health
yeah,
benefits, both
yeah,
mentally, physically, the community benefits of gardening. I mean, here on my little road, we stop and have gotten to know all of our neighbors because I've been out in the garden. I mean, there's just
well,
so many benefits to a
it just
garden.
doesn't make sense to me. For one thing, the food miles on food. I mean, most of your food's coming
Yes.
from
Yeah.
so far. It's like the carbon
Right.
footprint on that is ridiculous.
Yeah. How
I
are
mean, if
you
you're
getting
growing that food in your
oranges?
yard, that
Yeah.
immediately eliminates so much carbon footprint just in
Right.
that one
Right.
thing, just the food
Like,
miles.
well, think
I'm,
about this. If you bought an orange this week, where did the orange come from? Because the oranges in
yeah.
Florida are not ripe.
Yeah, I mean, your avocados are coming from Mexico. Your oranges are
Yeah,
coming from somewhere. I mean, who knows where? I mean, everything's coming from somewhere because this stuff isn't. You eating a watermelon in the middle of winter. Where'd that come from? I mean, it's just
exactly.
there's so many food miles. I mean, the food in the United States travels anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500 miles on average.
Yeah,
That I mean,
that is
imagine the carbon footprint on that. It's crazy. And just decreasing that is amazing by having your own urban homestead.
hmm
Uh, decreasing if you do it right, like we do it, you're not using pesticides and herbicides. If enough people are doing that, think about how much you're reducing the carbon footprint or the not even
Yeah,
carbon footprint, but the chemical footprint on the planet, right?
right.
Um, you're increasing natural habitat. I mean, if you're doing it in a permaculture design like we do, we got bushes and we got plants everywhere, and there's
Oh
all
man, I
kinds of.
have so
I
many.
invite a lot of wildlife.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it. My wife's like, why are all the rabbits? Why do all the rabbits and squirrels and groundhogs and everything always end up in our yard? I'm like, because it's home. I mean, look at it. It's like, why
I
wouldn't
like
they be here? This is where they
I
want
was
to
yeah.
be. Nobody,
Why
none of the
wouldn't
other
you be?
neighbors are battling with raccoons and possums and groundhogs and all the things like we are.
Yeah.
Why? Because we have nature in our backyard.
Right,
And
same here. I mean, the deer like
yeah,
have a beeline to our house, and we have and my yard in the summer, you can stand out in my yard and you just hear the
yeah.
bugs and the bees and the birds. They just love
And,
it.
and I
And when
think the
it
more of that,
rains,
yeah,
we can hear the birds out there all excited because they're out in my garden getting worms.
yeah. And the more of that we can put in our cities, in our towns,
Yeah.
how much better is that for air quality and just overall just every benefit that brings into a community? I mean, that's if you could get 20% of a town
Right.
gardening and homesteading in that manner. I mean, think about how much better that is for that town and city.
Well,
It's
and
just, it's a huge
pollinators
difference.
are
Yeah.
we need them
Yeah.
so bad, just even for not non-edible plants. We need them
Yeah.
for like native species and shrubs, and we need them for so many things. And having a garden brings those
I was a little
pollinators in.
upset because, I have a cherry tree, but I have one cherry tree. Well, it takes two
Uh-oh.
to make cherries, right? So, but it was great because my neighbors had a cherry tree,
Oh
had
no. Oh
a
no.
cherry tree. They cut it down this winter. I
Oh
was like,
no.
no, I'm not going to get any cherries. It was great. I don't know why I honestly don't know why they cut it down. I mean, they broke a big branch off because their kids were climbing in it here a while back and broke a huge branch off of it, but it was still alive. It didn't look real pretty, but it was still
Now
alive.
you're gonna have to get another
Now I'm
one.
going to have to plant another cherry tree or I'm not going to have any cherries because I mean, I haven't seen any other cherry
You're gonna
trees
be out
anywhere
there with your
close.
little paintbrush.
But that goes to say too. I mean, it's like again, if you have enough people in a community planting things like that, we're all
Yes,
benefiting from each other,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
we
Well,
could
and
all
you can
have one
grow,
cherry tree or one, whatever tree
right.
that crosses,
Because
um,
I can tell you from I have 3 apple trees on my quarter of an acre. And my 3 apple trees last year gave me, I think we figured it was somewhere between 11 and 13 bushels. What am I going to do with all of that? I shared it with my neighbors.
yeah,
It just, it's such a community thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's one of the huge benefits of it, which we can talk more about that later for sure. But I think and honestly, when I think people are homesteading, we naturally use less waste. I know that we take out a whole lot less garbage now than we used to because we compost. You
Right?
know, we're throwing
Yeah.
food scraps. A lot of times, what we do is we're throwing the food scraps in the vermicompost bin, but some of them end up in the regular compost. But then we're throwing like paper and cardboard and stuff in the regular compost. You
Hmm.
know, and so I mean, it's like a lot less stuff's going in the
And you're
garbage. A
bringing
lot,
in a lot less food
yeah,
packaging.
yeah, because you're growing your own stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're bringing in a lot less.
Well, and
So I mean,
even if you
a lot less
can't,
waste.
yeah, yeah.
And water runoff. I mean, we're collecting water. I don't know about you, but I'm trying to put in as much water collection as I can. And I'm trying to make my property where it's absorbing that water. We're
Right.
making better soil, which is going to absorb it and use that water. And it's not just running down a city drain and heading out to wherever and total pollution, grabbing all the oil stains and everything along the way and ending up in the rivers and lakes. We're trying to use it up on our property. And I think that's great too. And of course, I mentioned already air purification. I mean, the more plants you
Right.
have in a city, I mean, it's just going to be better for the air. So, I mean, there's so many, just the environmental benefits alone
Right. I mean,
of homesteading in the city are just amazing.
not having that concrete to heat
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
because so many cities have the problem of in the summer they heat up, and that
Yeah.
not having that concrete and
I
having
thought that was
plants
from the meth
instead.
labs, but yeah.
Yeah, it might be that too. Both you and I have had those as
Yeah, we've
neighbors.
had those
Uh,
around. Yeah.
but it cools the earth down too, because you don't have that cement or that blacktop
Yeah.
heating
Yeah.
up.
So, I mean, the environmental benefits. There's probably way more than what we're mentioning here. So it's really hard to believe an article like that can be accurate because there's so many other things to
Yeah,
consider than the production of the things that you're bringing into your property. There's so many other things to
exactly.
consider. So I don't know. I don't believe there's a lot of accuracy in that article, but there's so many benefits. I also think that an urban homestead, just like a rural homestead, can present a bunch of business opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, you can set up veg stands, you can make all kinds of things in your kitchen. You can, I mean, there's so many opportunities. I mean, literally, there's a lot you can do. I mean, if I wanted to run a comfrey business, I could comfrey business because I have a
Right.
lot of comfrey, right? I just hate shipping things. But I'm just saying you could plant a lot of one thing, or you
Right.
could make, I make salves. You could sell those salves. There's so many things you can do, even on a small piece of property.
Sell the extra vegetables,
Yeah, to
sell
create
herbs,
things.
sell
Yeah.
cut flowers, sell,
Yep. You can set
yeah,
up a few
especially in
beehives
the,
and sell honey. I mean, you could do so
yeah,
many things in an urban homestead. So
yep.
there's all kinds of business opportunities in that.
And
Um,
maybe in some ways, if you're living in town and in the city, you might have more opportunities,
because you got customers all around you.
because a lot
Yeah.
of times in the country, people might have a
Yeah.
few of their own chickens and maybe their own garden. But when you're in
Yeah.
town, you
Yeah.
often have a very large amount of people and way less people growing something.
I think
So
about
you actually
Curtis
might have a
Stone.
better opportunity there to sell
Yeah. Think
things.
about Curtis Stone, who was doing all these urban gardens up
Yeah.
in Canada.
Yep.
And he was basically just doing market gardening on several small backyards in the city. He's right there in with the people. He has very little footprint on getting that stuff to market because he's right
Right.
there, close in the
And
city
almost no
doing.
overhead because he was doing their
Yep.
gardening in their
Yeah,
yards.
he's gardening
Yeah.
in yards. He's making really good money
Yeah.
doing it right there in the city on small spaces. I mean, people who don't know can look up Curtis Stone on that because he used to be really big on that. He's since moved rural, but in his beginning days, that's all he did,
Yeah.
and he
He
promoted
did
that really
like
big.
spin farming, I think is what he
Yeah,
called it.
yeah,
Yep.
and it was really really productive and uh,
Yeah.
profitable for him for sure. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there, and besides that, just turning what is an asset or a liability into an asset. Take your house, your home, your property, which is a total liability. It's doing nothing but taking money from you
Hmm.
in form of house payment and
Yeah.
taxes and upkeep and all these things. And then you turn it into an asset because now it's producing for you. Your
Yeah. A
property is actually
productive
producing
homes.
food, it's
Yeah.
producing products for your home. And yeah, you can turn that liability into an asset. And I love that you can take that in the city and do that. And I just love also that just in the city, you inspire your neighbors. I have convinced many, many, many people in town to start gardening just because
Yeah.
I'm gardening. Not because I'm after preaching to them. I'm just doing it. And they're like, oh, that looks nice. I think I'll do that. And they start doing
Right.
it,
Yeah.
you know?
And
I
even
think
if
that's
it's,
cool.
I want a rhubarb plant or I want a couple strawberries, it doesn't have to be like their whole yard. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess I get really, I guess I just want to encourage people. This is the beginning of what we're going to talk about a few things here, but I want to encourage people that it is worth it.
It
And
is.
it can be practical depending on where you're at. There might be situations you're in where it isn't practical to do it there. There's still things you can do. You can still and you can buy, you can support those, or and you can bring
You
in the
can
vegetables.
kitchen homestead.
There are absolutely homesteading activities that you
Yes.
could participate in an apartment without growing a single thing.
Yeah. I think
But
everybody can homestead at some small
but as
degree.
far as growing some food and doing the things, it may not be practical for you where you are. But I would say the majority of suburban and urban homesteaders could do it, could grow some things, can produce some products, and it is practical for them, and it is possible right where they're at. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges and maybe some solutions with to those challenges. Obviously, space constraints are your
That's,
biggest challenge. Um,
yep. Huge.
so you have to be selective on your crops. You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of crops I don't mess with because they take up a lot of space for what they give you. So you want to select things that are compact, high yield crops.
Or things that are expensive, but that are easier to grow. I think of
Right.
like,
You could,
with
yeah,
market gardening, one of the most profitable things that market gardeners grow are lettuce
yeah.
because pound for pound, it's very expensive, but it's
Herbs.
very,
Look at
and
all the
herbs.
herbs. I mean,
Yeah.
little
So
container of herbs is super expensive, and yet they're easy to
exactly.
grow. I mean, we
Right.
were talking about in the well, I'll just go ahead and mention here, but we were talking about in the members pre-show. We always give some suggestions of things we're checking out at the time, but you know, I went to the Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree selling these stackable 3-tier
Right.
stackable planters that make like almost like a garden tower, and they're like $1.25 a section. You can stack those up and plant herbs in those things, and have your own little herb garden in a couple square feet, right?
Yeah. Right.
Just growing up
Vertical. Vertical
vertical
gardening. Yeah.
gardening, yeah. And so
Yep.
you know you can just and grow herbs that are obviously a very expensive thing to
Yeah.
buy in the
So
store and
like
grow
pick
several kinds.
things like what do you love to grow, but is, or what do you love to eat, but is really expensive? I mean, some
Mhm.
things might be better off for you to grow or to buy.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to kind of evaluate that
And,
and what's, yeah.
and evaluate like the dirty dozen. There's the things that are way worse for you when you
Yes.
buy them, and you
Yeah.
can grow that are cleaner. You know, there's always different ones in that. I mean, potatoes are in it quite often, and I can't even think of all the things. But there are things that are highly sprayed with
I think
pesticides, and
strawberries are in
yeah, yeah.
there.
So
Yeah.
and you grow them yourself, and of course you're going to be a lot healthier because you're not going to. It's hard to wash that stuff off, right? They call those
Yes.
the dirty dozen. You might pick from some of those that you like. Um, but you know, high yield crops, things are going to put a lot of food on your plate for the space they take up. Of course,
Yep.
vertical gardening. We mentioned the
Vertical.
towers, trellises, anything you can grow
Yeah,
up
you
is
can
always
make
great.
use of I actually saw this and I can't remember where I saw it, but it was a picture of somebody had a rooftop garden and it was in the city and a watermelon had grown down the side of the building, but it was way up high. And people were like, uh-oh, when that falls,
Yeah,
it's going to hit somebody down below. So they were using they were using vertical space. They were using, I mean, I have actually trellised watermelons and big squashes. So you can trellis all of those. And there's different ways to do trellises, but you can use balconies and buy some netting and possibly
Mhm.
use that to grow up. I mean,
The-
containers and grow bags.
Sure. Back in the early
They're,
days when I first started homesteading, I had rabbits, right? And I was raising my rabbits in a colony at the time. And I built this little lean-to off the side of my garage. I still have that lean-to, but I've roofed over it since. At the time, it wasn't. It was a chicken wire top. And then I had like places where they could go in there, and it was a colony of rabbits, right? And I put them in cages after that, and I moved that and redone it all. But I had moved them out of there. But I was throwing stuff in there for them to eat. I would just like throw pumpkins and squash and all this stuff in there for them to eat, and they just eat it and go about their business. And the whole colony of rabbits in there, right? So flash forward, I ended up taking a year or two off of rabbits because colony raising brought on some coccidiosis and I ran into some problems anyway. That space kind of went away I mean, I didn't even go in that space for a couple of years. So I go in there and middle of like late summer, I walk through the door of my shed because it has like a back door in my shed. And I walk in that area and I went, oh my gosh. And my rabbits had planted all this squash and all these pumpkins, all these seeds that were in there. They had scattered around. These things had climbed up, were hanging from the chicken wire. And I had like pumpkins and gourds and squash just all the way through this thing hanging down from the roof, from the
and
ceiling.
perfect fertilizer because rabbits great.
It was so funny. And I'm walking through there and I'm pulling off like these, 2 foot wide gigantic pumpkins are just hanging from the ceiling and they're bending. They're so heavy. The chicken wire is like bending down, squatting. It was hilarious.
That's great.
But I'm just saying this stuff wants to grow up,
Oh yeah, you can.
You just got to provide a space for it and it will grow up.
And
right?
some things some things you get 2 crops out of. I'm thinking like sweet potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
You can put those in a grow bag, grow sweet potatoes. They like the heat anyways. And then you can eat the vine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things like that.
If you think about things like that.
Yeah. Well, you like that with like beets.
Yes.
Beetroot versus beet greens. I mean, beet greens are great. Beetroot's even better.
They're some of our favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it's like I've even utilized in the wintertime. I like to keep stuff going. So I've got into, I didn't get into hydroponics so much, but I got into aquaponics and indoor aquaponics and growing food. Even in the winter, you can, put in microgreens and sprouting, and there's all kinds of ways to grow things, very limited space. So space can be overcome. Limited space can be overcome.
I have grown lettuce. I didn't this year just because it's been a busy year, but I have grown lettuce in soil inside in the winter under lights. When
I first started growing, I mean, of course, I got into it for health and I'm wanting to eat salads every day. I'm wanting to have lots of stuff. And I literally built these 2x4s in my basement on the cement floor, filled them with soil, put fluorescent lights over the top of them, was growing lettuce in my basement in a raised bed.
Pictures of this
in a raised bed on my basement. I think back then, it's been years. I mean, we're talking like
I remember seeing
10 years ago. I had raised beds on my basement floor with fluorescent lights hanging over them in the wintertime. Growing
shows
food.
You how long I've been following.
Yeah, you've been around for a long time, Rachel, and all this adventure. But yeah, I mean, just you find ways to overcome it. And you do it, right? I mean, there's so many, you just got to think outside the box a lot of times.
Microgreens are so expensive and you could grow those inside.
So nutritious
just about
and
anywhere.
So easy to grow. I just started 2 trays of them today in my house. I mean, even when even in the summertime, a lot of times I'll grow them just because they're so good. And I'll grow them, even though I got all this other stuff I could eat. I just like some microgreens,
Right. And sprouts. And I mean, there's things you can do in your kitchen. Even in a small apartment, even if you have no balcony, you could do those 2 things. Yep.
Obviously, another challenge you're going to have is overcoming some zoning, legal restrictions. I have those where I'm at. I mean, there's limits on animals. Some places you
have those. We even have those out at our property on 20 acres.
Yeah, there's places maybe where you can't have chickens, or anything, and you got to think outside the box if you want animals, or maybe just only have gardens and not have animals, or I mean, but you can also work and try to get ordinances changed. Some people are built for that. Some people aren't. As far as working with your local officials and, and trying to make things happen. But, I still think it's good to engage with them and try,
Yes.
And you know what? Encourage them to show them the benefits of urban homesteading.
Sometimes it's not that they don't want to allow it. It's that they just don't have any idea. Well, it's never been the subject has never been broached or they don't know what it is. So for example, here we can have 4 chickens, but we can't have ducks. And
Yeah.
so when I called the township and said, is there a reason we can't have ducks? And they said, no, nobody's ever asked.
Wow.
So yeah,
My biggest fear when dealing with officials is they read articles like we talked about earlier.
Yes.
And they think, oh, we can't allow this in our town because look at all the bad.
Exactly.
We need to be the ones going and saying, let me tell you about the good and tell you why that article may not be representing urban homesteading.
Yeah, come and see my garden.
Yeah.
Come and see the pollinators going around, Yeah.
Yeah, because articles like that will harm homesteaders when it comes to officials because they don't understand. And they only understand what they're seeing in like the big, media.
Right.
Well, media says this. Well, let me tell you why they're wrong. And so we need to have to be the ones to explain that to them and say, well, here's what that represented. Here's why it doesn't really apply to what we're doing, So, yeah, I think it's important that we do have those interactions. As difficult as they can be for some people, they are important. And a lot of times what's another big constraint or challenge for urban and suburban homesteaders, a lot of times when you're in rural and you're a farmer, that's your job.
Yep.
So there's where your time is invested in your property. A lot of times when you're urban and suburban, that's not your job. You have a job and you're doing that in your spare time. Yeah, you're doing that in your spare time, trying to do all these things. So time management can be a challenge.
Yeah, and that has been
homesteading. Yeah.
I think that's one of the differences between probably you and I hosting this podcast and other podcasters is a lot of the podcasters in this space are one of them or more of them are full-time on the farm or their homestead.
Their farm and their podcasts or YouTube channels are their income. Yeah. And it's not that way for us. Yeah.
Yeah. We're you have a full-time job plus. And I have a full-time, I don't have a full-time, but I have a very, very busy cleaning business that I run. And it's the time constraint is hard because even though we don't have a huge homestead, and I think a lot of people are under the impression that it takes less time, but you and I have proven that a small homestead can wear you out.
Yeah, there's a lot. There can be a lot to do for sure. Yeah. But back when I was early days in this, I was an over the road trucker. I was working 70 plus hours a week. I'm away from home, and I've still made it happen. I had to prioritize my tasks and find chunks of time, and I got them done. I was home on the weekends, and we would just bust out big projects on the weekends. Work other things out when I had time. Did utilize some automation and some smart tech with timers and water delivery and things like that. You just have to just work around some things like that. So it can be done, but time management is really, really important. I did a podcast with a guy, permaculture apprentice, well back, and our whole podcast was about time management. I mean,
creating a routine is going to be huge.
He throws out some amazing emails. That guy gives you more in newsletters. I actually got his course, and I did his permaculture course, and it's great. But he gives you so much free stuff in his emails that it's worth being on his newsletter just for that.
Nice.
But yeah, his courses are pretty in depth.
I can always use time management stuff. I mean, just as like anybody, I still waste time like anybody does. I get stuck on Facebook and scroll, but it is important. If you're working, you kind of have, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you do this. You have your before work routines and your after work routines. And for me, a lot of my homestead is based in my kitchen and ferments. So I'm checking my SCOBY and I'm checking, which is your kombucha SCOBY. Yeah. And I'm checking my sourdough and I've just got all this little stuff that I do. And
now you got some seeds going too. So you're watching those.
And spring, it's a little bit more work. Like once those seeds get in the ground, my life does slow down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's when they're baby seedlings. They're like babies. You kind of got to baby them.
Once you got to get past that hardening off phase and get them in the ground. And once they start getting established and you can ease up a little bit, then it's just worrying about weeds encroaching on them and making sure they got enough water and,
weather
things like that.
Or animals, but
So, I mean, time management's important. doing
Yeah.
it the best way you can with that, but you can do it. Like I said, I was about as extreme of a case of getting it. I mean, normally I don't try to put myself up as the ultimate example, but there was a time when I had very little time for it. And that was how I built this homestead in the beginning. And I was working over 70 hours a week and built this
Yeah, and I
homestead.
think you bite off small pieces and chew them, and then you bite off another piece. So
Yeah.
just don't overdo it at first. Kind of
It's easy to
slowly.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is
But
so
I
easy to
saved
do.
it. I just saved the big projects for the weekend, when I had a day
Yeah.
off, and I would just spend the day getting it done. And there was a couple times I, cordially invited a friend over to help me to get that big project done so I can make sure I got it done in the time that I had to do it. And like I said, we've done a few
Right. Well,
podcasts on
and
time
you're,
management. Yeah.
I mean, you've talked about it. You have animals. I don't have any animals right now other than the dogs, but so you had to build cages and all
Hmm.
of that. So it's just learning one thing at a time, and
Yeah.
you add things to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's just some of the challenges you'll face, and those are the biggest ones. There's obviously more, but most of them are. I'll say this too. I'm going to throw this in there. I'm going to tell you. I think that the predator issues are probably worse in some cases in the city than they are in the country.
There's no because a lot of our predators have no predators. We have a
I grew
very
up in
large,
the country,
yeah,
and I'm telling you, I have more problems with raccoons, possums, dogs, and cats in the city than I ever had
yeah,
living and growing up in the country, ever.
yeah. I we have deer here
Yeah, and
because
deer too. You can
there's
have deer if
no
you're suburban,
you
really.
can't hunt deer in
Yeah,
town. So,
yeah. So you're gonna
they
have that
and they
issue.
know it. They figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's another challenge I think that people don't even think about when it comes to urban. It's actually, I think, worse than be having a rural homestead. Not that you don't have that pressure. I mean, you have coyotes, a lot more coyotes and things in the
Right.
rural, but I'm telling you, it is not as if those things do not exist in the
Oh
city.
no,
That
they do.
you can have the issues.
We have fox here. I have not seen a coyote here, but we have had a fox in
Hmm.
our yard when we had
Yep.
the chickens. We have fox, we have eagles, we have deer,
Hmm.
we have raccoons, all of that right here. And I can look and see neighbors on every window. It's yeah.
When I used to, we talking about me when I used to colony raise rabbits, and I'd had that, it was that same pen and I had chicken wire pen. Well, a cat had got in there. I
Oh
had
my.
went out there to feed one morning and caught the cat with a small a bun in its mouth, trying to get back through the fence with that bun. And I actually got it and got it away from it, and it skedaddled out of that cage. And I had to fix up the fence where it got through the fence. But I'm just saying, that sounds like, you think that ain't an issue, but there's issues like
Oh
that,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, cats. I know a friend here locally was having problems with a neighbor,
Hmm.
a dog killing chickens. In town.
Yep. I mean,
You know. Yeah.
I think in some cases it can be worse. Let's just talk about a few minutes about just evaluating your property, because maybe you're thinking,
Right.
okay, you convinced me. I don't have to wait or maybe possibly never do it because I can't never move to the country, or it's going to be many years. So yeah, I'm going to do it right where I'm at. We got to evaluate. I think there's some important things to evaluate on your property just to see what the potential is, right? And explore your options. Do you have sun exposure? Because it
Yeah.
very well may be you're pinned between a couple tall buildings and you don't have, right? But do you have a roof access? Do you have other
Right.
things you can do? I mean, you just really have to see it. It does take sun to grow plants outside. Obviously, you
Yeah.
can grow them
There's
indoors
some
under
plants
lamps,
that
but
Yeah, there's some plants that will do better with less sun, and those that might be what you have to
yeah,
do.
if you do get a little, but you need some level of sun
Yep.
exposure to grow some things, and some will do it with 4 hours. Some need 6. I mean, you just have to kind of
Hmm.
see what you can grow, and so understand where the sun is at different points of the day, different seasons of the year, how much sun you got, because that'll change in the spring versus fall.
Yep.
It maybe not be any sun right here in the fall, even if it is in the spring or something like that. So, you need to really think about that and think about where you're going to have sun throughout the year. Soil quality, it can be a huge one when it comes to town,
Huge,
because there's
especially
been a
in
lot of
town.
construction. There can be a lot of lead in the ground, a lot of all kinds of just
Chemicals, yeah,
chemicals and
whatever.
things. So
Asbestos. Yep.
it becomes more important to get soil testing done in the city,
Yep.
unless you're doing raised beds, you're raising up and you're getting off that. You can actually guard that, build raised beds, bring in fresh soil, not worry about that. But if you're going to be
Yep.
planting in the ground, you're probably going to run and get a soil,
Yeah,
understand
need
your
to get
soil
some good
quality.
tests. Yep.
Yeah, because it is important. So understand your soil. evaluate your existing infrastructure. Do you have sheds and garages and whatnot? These things can be used for certain things when you're going to be a homesteader, right? I mean, you can convert a shed into a rabbitry or a quail aviary or something like that. You can, do you have walkways and things like that you can plan along, put beds along. I mean, this is all infrastructure that can be used or even built and built around, because I'm going to tell you, infrastructure is obviously a huge expense when you're getting started. So evaluating what you already have and what you can use can be big.
Yep.
Putting in walkways and greenhouses and sheds and all that kind of stuff can get really expensive really fast, especially with the price of lumber these days. It can get really expensive. Everything is crazy expensive these days.
It's crazy.
So you just got to think outside the box on how you can kind of put in your infrastructure. Check out your local ordinances. If you're evaluating your property, you're going to know what you can and can't do. I don't think, when it comes to gardens, most, unless you're in an HOA, you might have
some of them will make you
evaluate
put it in the backyard and not the front yard.
Yeah, evaluate that. And there's even some, I guess there's some towns like that too, where they don't want you having, which I can't imagine even living in a town that you couldn't grow something like that. But can you put in trees? Can you put in shrubs? Can you have animals? These are all local ordinances that you need to find, or HOA rules. If you live in one of those, find out what you can and can't do. And water quality is obviously, it can be an issue.
Yeah, that's what I was.
If you're going to use your city water to water your garden, which you can, but it will do better with rainwater. So if you can set up any kind of a rainwater collection and use that water, it's going to do better.
And then what is the rainwater running off of? And so that's something you want to consider. Yeah.
So, I mean, these are things that you want to evaluate, consider, and I always take the positive outlook and say, okay, I can or I can't, or there's a workaround. Figure out a way. If you don't want to use your nasty city water, set up some kind of water collection, or use the water. I mean, I can tell you this for sure, that a plant will grow better with city water than it will with no water in a drought.
Yeah, because you're on city water, right?
Yeah, and I've watered my garden many times with city water. I try to use my water collection, but we've had some pretty severe droughts the last few years.
Yeah,
and I just didn't have enough. Yeah, I just didn't have enough water. So I had to use my city water, and you know what? I had great gardens. Would they have been better with rainwater? They would have been better, but they grew.
Well, I think everything's better with rainwater.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can see that when it rains. Everything blows up.
Even my well water I have well water, the garden still loves the rainwater more.
Well, I try to collect as much as possible, but there's ways around that. So evaluate and consider the infrastructure you have, because you might want to put in some infrastructure for water collection. What I was getting at there. Your garden beds are going to be part of that. Pathways, greenhouse, compost bins, all this is infrastructure that you probably want to have. We're going to want to have. Again, the soil testing, you're going to want to test for, maybe if you're going to be planting in the ground, nutrients, heavy metals, pH levels, really important. You may have to change the pH because most things like a neutral pH. A few things don't, but most things like a neutral pH, grows best that way. Get into making your own compost tea, vermicompost, possibly. Consider chop and drop plants like comfrey and dock and some other big plants.
Over and over.
Yeah. Get into biochar. I mean, I've recently got into that in the last year or so, and I think it adds a lot of value to your property.
And you can do that in a small spot. You don't have to have a big, huge one.
Yeah. Do a little fire pit and make your own biochar in that. I mean, of course, we mentioned this earlier, but you want to pick your crops, but pick your trees and your shrubs. Think about the height and the width of your trees and your shrubs and how much space they're going to take up and what they're going to shade out when they grow. Put them in a place, be strategic, because you might shade out your garden. They may not shade them out for the first 2 or 3 years. Think in 5 years, where's this tree going to be? And is it going to shade out anything? You got to think like that. You also got to think about that when you're putting in your infrastructure. If you're putting up a shed, what's it going to shade out, or what's it going to block?
Especially if you got a really tiny micro yard.
Consider your annual crops, but also consider your perennial crops. Those are going to come back every year, and there's something, and some of those can take up a lot of space, but they're also going to require a lot less work long term once you get them established. Sure. And so they're worth having, but consider that, make things you really like, make a space for them. They're going to be there for, you can put in an asparagus bed that's going to last you 25, 30 years, but it's going to be there for 25 or 30 years. You have to consider
and nothing else can really grow there.
Yeah. And you can't put anything else there. That's exactly right. It's space dedicated to the asparagus bed. So I mean, these are all things that you're going to want to think about. And I say, when you're doing that, when you're considering your trees, your shrubs, your annual plants, your perennial plants, pick things you like to eat. Start
Yes.
there, because if you don't want to eat it, don't plant it. I mean, so I've seen so many people plant things that they don't like because everybody
Right.
else is growing them.
Yeah.
Don't
I
do
mean, if you
that.
don't like tomatoes, don't grow them.
Yeah, just because everybody else is growing them doesn't mean you have to grow them if you don't like them. Um, and also consider what grows well in your zone. Nothing is more aggravating than trying to force something to grow that doesn't grow
Yeah.
well. I mean, you're growing a lemon tree in Michigan, but you're putting work into it.
Right.
It's like if you want to
I
just,
don't anticipate ever getting lemons
yeah,
off of it. I am growing it for the leaves
and
because
it's
they
fun.
taste
Yeah.
good in a tea.
And
But
it's
yeah,
fun. Yeah, and it is fun to grow maybe a few things, but don't make it so difficult either. Grow things that like to grow. And you're
right.
gonna
Yeah. I mean, and you can do,
success spawns success. And if you feel good
yeah,
about you're growing a garden, you're gonna become a better gardener. It's just the way it works.
right.
I start my garden off every year by planting some radishes. I
Yeah.
like
You
radishes.
love
I
your
don't love
radishes.
radishes. I like radishes, right? And but
Yeah.
but man, nothing will kickstart your garden off in a year than having a bunch of radishes in your hand
Well, and
really
one way
quick,
you
you
can
know?
know what is growing really well in your area is looking at what's at the farmer's market, what the farms locally sell. And if they're selling, for example, we sell a lot of apples, cherries, and asparagus here because that grows really well here in our
Mhm.
climate. So that's what you should be growing. Don't be trying to grow, for example, me, a lemon tree in northern Michigan. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a time suck.
Yeah. It's okay to
Try to
do
grow
things for
things.
fun, but if this is
Yeah,
going to be, this is part of your, what you're going to feed your family with, and you need to rely on it.
right.
Stick with things that grow
Yeah.
well and things you like to eat. Again, back to the water management, get your water collection, consider water delivery, hoses, drip irrigation, things like that.
Yeah.
I actually never have used drip irrigation in my property. I've always just done things kind of by hand, and I kind of just do it. Hoses and sprinklers and, you know,
I
uh,
hope to
buckets.
get to that with some of my stuff, but sometimes drip irrigation just does not work with your
Yeah.
system. So we water from our lake. And
Yeah.
with drip irrigation, it clogs up. We've tried filters, we've tried multiple filters. It just clogs it up. So we don't use it.
To me, that's one of the benefits of urban homesteading, is that everything's pretty close to your house.
Yep.
So it is actually a lot easier to water by hand if you have to water by
Yeah.
hand. So, I mean, it doesn't take as long. It's like if we had more property. What I find a lot of times in the country is somebody has a few acres. It's not that they're growing a
They,
whole lot
s-
more than me. It's just way more spread out.
they
So
spread
now
out.
I'm
And
dragging hoses everywhere to do things. It takes a lot more time to take care of the same
right,
amount of stuff.
exactly.
So I
That's
actually find
why
that to be a benefit.
I actually think it's been a benefit that I have been here for so many years because we actually don't plan on, I don't know if my garden will be any bigger than it is now.
Yeah. But it'll be more spread out, I bet.
I don't know if it will. I mean, I
No.
might just because I have had
Well, your
moisture
food
issues.
forest certainly will be more spread out.
I will have more fruit and we'll have
Yeah.
animals now. But my garden itself might be a little bit more spread out because my garden has had some moisture issues with the amount of rain that we get. Because everything's so close together, I've had
Yeah.
some moisture type diseases. But
Absolutely.
I don't think I need to use the entire 20 acres. Like everything's going to still be really close to the house. I'm going to use permaculture zones.
You'll be using it, but you'll be feeding it with like hunting rather than growing.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
harvesting trees or maple syrup this time of
Mushrooms,
year and
whatever out in
mushrooms
the
and
woods.
stuff
Yeah,
like that.
things like
But
that. Yeah.
I have found that I don't need much more than what I have to grow
Mhm.
vegetables anyways.
Yeah. We grow plenty, honestly. I grow sometimes I
Yeah.
grow too much. I mean, I could be
Well, I
selling.
grow enough to
Yeah.
can and last us through the year. In fact, I just bought organic potatoes yesterday and it's
And remind
March.
people of what, your third of an acre?
I'm on a third of an acre and I
I'm on
just bought,
I'm on a
yeah.
quarter. I was on a tenth,
Yeah,
but now
and
I'm
I
on about a
have
quarter
yet,
acre.
I haven't bought onions in 2 years. I haven't bought garlic in 2 years. I haven't bought tomatoes in years and years and years,
Mhm.
even canned for the winter. And I'm on a quarter of an acre.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Third of an acre.
yeah,
I'm on a quarter acre.
a third. Yeah. So I'm on a third of an acre. And yeah, I mean, what I buy vegetable wise is usually lettuces and stuff because I still have yet to grow a nice crunchy head lettuce.
I probably grow more lettuce than, yeah, we don't grow head lettuce. It's just hard to grow in Indiana. It really is. I really
Yeah.
want to input that in my
And I buy
aquaponics system,
celery because I still haven't
but
mastered the art of celery. But
yeah,
a lot of vegetable, tomatoes and squash
there's so
and
much.
onions and kales and bread. I mean, I haven't bought in years.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Just because you're an urban homestead, most places, you're not just limited to a garden. And I would say in most towns, you can have livestock as well. There are some places where you can't,
Yep.
but most you can have some
Yeah,
livestock.
I
You
can
can
have
certainly,
some
yeah,
chickens.
you can have chickens, you can have rabbits, you can have
And I
quail.
could have rabbits and quail here.
If you have a large enough property, you can even have goats. I mean, if you have like a quarter of an
Yeah,
acre or like half an acre in town or in the suburbs, a lot of places don't even mind if you have a couple goats. I mean, you can do
right.
that.
Potbelly
Pheasant,
pigs.
you can raise fish.
Yeah.
There's things you can do on a small piece of
Hmm.
property to bring in meat sources. I mean, I do rabbits and quail. You've done chickens in the past where you're at. You can do things right on a small piece of
Yep.
property. But don't also just think about, here's the thing. When you think about urban homesteading, don't just limit yourself to your property. Take advantage of homesteading on a bigger scale. In other words,
Yeah.
think about public lands where you can hunt and fish and forage. These are opportunities to bring things into your homestead that anybody can take advantage of. And just
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be limited to your properties because you're homesteading in the city. You
Well,
can
and I
go to
also
these
have
public
this.
lands and stuff and get those things.
I have this idea because I actually had a couple of my neighbors come to me about this spin homesteading. So
Mm.
instead of spin farming on
Yeah,
people's property, spin
growing different
homesteading.
things and sharing.
Like, my neighbors, no, they didn't want to do it, but they were like,
Oh,
if
using
you
their
want more
property.
room, the neighbors behind us have 2.5 acres,
Yeah.
which means they can have a lot more chickens than
Oh,
we
yeah. They were going to
can.
let you run chicken tractors.
They were
Yeah,
going to let us
that's
have
right.
chicken tractors on their property as long as we gave them some of the chicken
Hey,
eggs or the
yeah,
meat.
meat. Yeah.
So
That's,
there's
yeah, great
that
idea.
option.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things you can do and barter. Like you just said, you can barter those things. I think that's what we were talking about Curtis Stone earlier. And that's how he got people to give him let him use their yards to farm
Yeah, I
in.
think
And he would just give them a little bit of the produce.
that's what I thought. Yeah.
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 And he would basically pay them with produce and to use their yard, and that's bartering. You can do things like that. You can trade this for that and bring more stuff. I mean, I've traded rabbits for pork.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually traded live rabbits to a guy for a bunch of processed pork. Heck yeah, I'll do that trade all day long. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
mean, there's things you can do like that. And then there's just we've talked about it there's so much more to homesteading than growing gardens and raising
Yes.
animals.
I mean, you can
That you-
homestead in your kitchen.
yes, we've mentioned how many times. I think that cooking from scratch is the most underrated homesteading skill, bar none,
It
hands down.
is.
It is the
Yep.
most important, most underrated skill that you can do. You can grow all the food you want, raise all the animals you want. If you don't know how to cook it, it's going to do you no good.
Exactly.
If you don't like what the final product and you don't want to put it in your body, what good was it doing it all? Learn how to cook from scratch that in a way that tastes great to you, because that is a great skill. But just getting into that point, learning how to preserve your food, canning, dehydrating,
Hmm.
fermenting, freezing, all these things, there's tricks,
Yeah.
all this stuff. Learn those things because
Yep.
you can do all that on a
And you can
small
do
homestead.
all of that on a small
Yeah.
scale. I
None of
mean,
these things are
fermenting,
stuff you can't do.
fermenting, you use a pint. You can start with a pint-sized jar
Yeah.
or a quart-sized jar. Freezing, well, everybody has a freezer, I'm pretty sure, even if it's your refrigerator freezer. Dehydrating, you can actually do in your oven without a dehydrator, but they
Yeah.
sell fairly small ones. Canning, they have your electric canner, which
Hmm.
holds what, 4 quart
4 quart jars. Yeah.
jars. It doesn't have to be this thing that
Yeah. You
takes
don't have
up
to
a
go
lot
out
of
and get
space. So if
you
you're
don't have to go
living
out and
in
get the
a
$300, $400 equipment. You can get
right,
cheaper and do it too.
if you're living in the city, you can do some of these things.
Mhm.
Even drying can even be
You can just
drying the
hang.
herbs that you
Yeah.
grow. You can just hang them up.
Hang them.
I
Yeah.
do that with almost a lot of my herbs. Almost all of
I
my
do have a
herbs,
lot
I
of
just
them.
hang
Yeah.
them.
I've actually got this basket that hangs, and it's got like these zipper pockets. You can just shove everything in that and let it dry, and
Yeah,
wind blows through it and dries out your herbs, and it kind of holds everything in there too, which is
right.
nice too. Because even if I even do that for like seed collection, I'll put stuff in there that I want to dry out for the seeds, and I'll just stuff it in there and let it completely dry out where the seeds just fall out of it, and then I can just reach in there and it holds all the seeds in there, and I can just reach in there and grab them.
Yeah, and so
So
you can do all this living in the city, even if you don't even have a balcony, if you learn to cook and preserve food and make yogurt and make sauerkraut and kimchi and bake bread, and you go to the the farmer's market and support another farmer, or you even go to the grocery store and buy some of this, just learning how to cook and eat healthy can be,
Yeah.
your homestead kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Yep.
think we even take it to a whole nother level. I mean, homesteading, it just doesn't have to be, just because you're on a small piece of property doesn't mean it has to be like some lesser thing. You can actually close loops on a small piece of property. I've been doing it for years. I've been working on closing loops like crazy. Like seed saving is closing loops.
Yeah.
You're seed saving,
Yep.
you're replanting, you don't have to bring in that product anymore. You save the seeds, you plant the seeds, you grow the product, you save more seeds. It's this closed loop system where you're not bringing in anything. Plant propagation. You're taking cuttings, your things like that. You can root things, replant them, spread them, grow more of them. Livestock loop. You can
Yeah.
grow food, livestock feed, raise your livestock, eat. I mean, you have the whole, like rabbits with my rabbits. I mean, they're giving birth, they're making more rabbits. I'm feeding them mulberry leaves and things from my
Right.
property. I mean, you can close loops in that too. And really
Exactly.
implementing permaculture does a lot of that through your food guilds and things, and your chop and drop and feeding their soil and all these things that you're doing.
And
I
you can
mean,
start to learn herbal medicine and growing
yes.
herbs, and some of that can start to feed, you grow ginger because
Yeah.
you get indigestion, or
Yeah.
you grow mint to help with a stuffy nose. There's all these things that you can do and
Mhm.
learn while you're still in the city, and even if you never leave. And then I wanted to talk about you said at the end you have engaged with the local community.
Yeah.
I also
So
wanted to
important.
remind people, because I did this for 2 years and I actually really, really enjoyed this. I was a part of our community garden.
Hmm.
A lot of places have a community garden. So if you live in a city and you have zero options for growing anything inside, unless you grow like microgreens and sprouts, um, some of these places have community gardens. I had a plot, I think it was 20 by 40
Wow. That's pretty big.
was my plot. Yeah. And I paid $80 for a year for it.
Yeah. Wow. You were
And
way
ours,
balls
I
to the
didn't
edge.
apply for it, but ours did offer scholarships.
Yeah.
They offered scholarships and discounts for
And the thing
specific
is,
things.
you could do that. And a lot of libraries actually have seed libraries now where you can actually go get the
Ours
seed for
does.
free.
Yeah.
Ours does too. And you could
Yeah.
use free seeds, plant in your community garden and have your garden space. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And then you have community, because guess what?
Yes.
Everybody that's at the community loves to do?
Yep.
Garden. Now,
You're
some of the
meeting
people are
people.
growing just flowers. I grew all vegetables on mine. And you know what they also have there? All the tools.
Yep.
You come there with nothing but gardening gloves and maybe a water bucket.
Yeah.
They had the hose, the wheelbarrows, they had the water hookup, they had everything. It even came with compost, unlimited amounts of
Wow.
compost. Yeah. And so a lot of towns and cities are starting to do that. And if your town doesn't have one, you might want to talk to them about starting to have one. I just saw recently they're putting another one in because it's become so popular. So
Yeah.
there is that option to
Or yeah, you
be
can be the
part of a
person.
community garden,
You can be
or
the person that
find
organizes that.
somebody,
Yeah.
a friend, meet somebody that
Mhm.
maybe has a little bit bigger yard and it works better, and maybe you could work out an arrangement to grow some things on their property.
Or just do some guerrilla gardening, go down to the local city park
Yes.
and make you a spot and
Plant yourself a little squash plant and run
yeah.
away.
Hey,
Those
I wouldn't be
squash seem
against
to
it.
grow no matter what you do. So
I,
just
I
stuff it
wouldn't
in
be
some
against
ground. Yeah.
it. Well, we say all this to say this: don't be discouraged, and don't think
You
you
can do
have
this
to get into the
anywhere.
country. Like I said, there's so much horn blowing going on about get out of the city, panic, 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 get your legacy going, develop your land, do your thing. Great if you can, but if
Yeah.
you feel like that's too much pressure and you just ain't going to happen anytime soon, don't not do anything.
Right. Well, and like you said, even if you just have decided, I like it here.
Yeah.
I don't want to move.
Or you
I
just don't
like
want
it.
to, or you just don't want to go in debt for 30 acres, and you think,
Yeah.
man, this place is paid for. I'd rather just stay here and make it happen here. Do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Do that. You can do it. And, like I said, there's a lot to evaluate, a lot to think about. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do everything that I'm
This is
doing.
2024. You can do whatever you want.
That's right. Well, I just think that it's a lot of people. I run into people all the time that just think that again, I've said this over the years many times, that people are always looking for that someday, someday I was that
Right.
guy for so
Now
long.
is the day. Now is the
Someday,
day.
and you don't have to wait till someday. You can do it.
Right.
You know, I guess what we'll do is we'll just end with that, and you can give your little saying that I think wraps all this up so well. And I'll say, happy homesteading, folks. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
That's right.